This one is looking to attack and looking for a sixer, whereas this one is willing to defend and win by patience. That's exactly how option buyers and sellers think. Let's go deeper. Hi, I am Pranav VK, your option strategy guide here at Stockshaala by Kotak Securities. In this video, let's go deeper and understand the psychology of both option buyers versus option sellers so that we can identify the edge and take advantage of it. To start with, let's look at the core differences in terms of risk and reward for an option buyer versus a seller. Starting with the first core difference, an option buyer pays premium, whereas an option seller receives premium. The second one is risk. A buyer has limited risk, whereas a seller has unlimited risk. Third is reward. A buyer has unlimited reward potential, whereas a seller has only limited reward potential to the extent of the premium received. And finally, when it comes to the important point, that is the mindset, an option buyer is always looking for a big move and fast, whereas an option seller, on the other hand, wants nothing to happen because he gains from theta decay. And guess what? The markets are flat or in range-bound condition more than 70% of the times. Here's a quick analogy for you to understand this better. Option buyers are like gamblers with a fixed ticket looking for a jackpot, whereas option sellers are like insurance companies waiting for the premiums to just erode. Now let's discuss the behavioral patterns of buyers and sellers. As an option buyer, generally they're emotional as well as impatient, and whereas sellers are calm and calculated. On the other hand, they are often overtrading buyers, whereas option sellers focus on probability of profit. Buyers require smaller capital, because of which they enter and exit very fast, and they tend to not be satisfied with 2 or 3 trades, but rather they keep trading until their target goal is achieved, which is not at all a good sign. Whereas on the other hand, an option seller requires a much larger capital, and he requires patience and time for him to make profit even in a single trade. So that reduces the overtrading nature by default. More often than not, you will see that option buyers blame the market when stop loss hits, because the noise level is going to be extremely high, the volatility spikes are high, because of which they feel that the market is always to be blamed for. But the truth is, they do not have a plan in place. On the other hand, an option seller accepts small wins consistently. In fact, they don't do so many trades and take limited trades, because of which they also are able to focus and have patience until they make money. Making a profit via option buying requires you to time the market perfectly, and that is why all the buyers are always trying to time the moves perfectly. But on the other hand, as an option seller, you don't need to perfectly time the market, because even if the market is flat or in your direction, then you're going to make money. And because of which, your best bet would be doing option selling, even if it requires a larger capital, because it has higher probability of profit. Now remember that just because option selling has a higher probability of profit, you will end up with profits. It still requires a lot of skill, analysis and practice. Looking at this, we can clearly say that sellers often have a plan, whereas option buyers are always chasing a far-fetched dream. So now the question is, which one should you be? To answer that question, let me share my own example. I started off as an option buyer and eventually evolved into an option seller. When I was doing buying, I always heard that you're going to have big wins and smaller losses. But that was certainly not true for me, because when I just started off, I did not have a proper risk management system in place. And those big wins only come when there are really big moves, and that seldom happened. Whereas when I started doing option selling, I saw a fraction of the profit that I would expect in option buying, but still I was able to see that consistency. And seeing those green days every single month, that made me give more confidence to myself and peace of mind while sleeping. And I think that is what you should focus on. Trading is not just about making more money, but it is part of your lifestyle. And as a part of your lifestyle, it should not be something that stresses you out, but rather gives you peace of mind while sleeping as well. So in simple terms, I wouldn't recommend you to directly become a seller or a buyer. Rather, I would like you to start with a smaller capital, and that can be done with option buying only. Now, since you'll be starting with a smaller capital, even if you lose a certain amount of money, that's completely okay, because that is how you learn in the market. And eventually you can evolve to option selling as well as spreads. Now, many traders have this burning question that should I do both buying as well as selling, and which one would be profitable? My personal opinion is that you can do whatever you want, but the real choice comes in understanding and getting your edge, and that is possible only if you follow one system. As an option seller, you can always think of how an option buyer is thinking, and you can do the opposite. So think and make a choice wisely. And finally, when you have to lock in on whether to be a buyer or a seller, the most important thing you have to see is whether your personality aligns with the mindset of a buyer or a seller. So don't copy someone else's strategy, but try to copy their psychology and thought process of how to think. So to summarize what we have learned so far, we looked at the psychology of a buyer and seller in terms of risk and reward, as well as their behavioral patterns as well. So we looked at option selling and buying requires two different types of personalities, and we know that to choose one, we have to align with its personality. If you liked what you saw, then go ahead and share this with your friends. You're watching Stockshaala by Kotak Securities. I am Pranav VK, and I'm going to see you in the next video.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.